The first time I saw her cry, she didn't know I was watching. It was just past midnight. I'd stepped out to toss the trash, barefoot, hoodie zipped halfway up, when I noticed the soft glow through her kitchen window across the yard. Her back was to me, but her shoulders told the story. The way they lifted, held, and then crumpled. The way her hand covered her mouth like the sound of her own grief might betray her. I should have turned away, should have given her privacy. But I couldn't, because even in that quiet, shattering moment, she looked like the loneliest person I'd ever seen. And some part of me, the part one didn't want to admit was hungry, ached to go to her. It started with a moving truck and a broken garden gnome. My name's Evan. I'm 26, freelance graphic designer, mostly stuck behind a laptop, trying to make enough to cover rent and student loans. I live in a modest duplex on the edge of town, the kind with creaky floorboards, mismatched shutters, and neighbors you wave at but don't really know. Until her. Her name was Olivia. I found that out a week after she moved in next door, though I'd noticed her well before that. She arrived in a black SUV, windows down, hair pulled back into a low bun, sunglasses on, composed, alone. She looked like she'd been through something, though I couldn't tell you what. Not at first. There was just a heaviness about her, a deliberate stillness. The first day she arrived, I was hauling in groceries. She was directing the movers, pointing toward rooms without raising her voice. Her tone was clipped, steady, not rude but rehearsed, like she'd done this before. Left somewhere. Started over. One of the movers bumped into the stone gnome on my side of the lawn, technically ours, I guess, since the grass ran continuous between the units. It toppled over and split at the base. She saw it happen, winced slightly, and looked over at me. "I'll replace it," she called out. I waved it off. "Honestly, he's been threatening to fall apart for years." She smiled. Just once. Quick. But it wasn't one of those meaningless neighbor smiles. There was something in her eyes, like she saw through the joke to the part of me that wanted her to linger. That night, her porch light stayed on late. Through my kitchen window, I could just make out her shadow moving behind half-unpacked boxes. A couple days later, I saw her again. She was out front pulling weeds from the flower bed in slacks and a silk blouse, clearly not dressed for yard work. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows. I was heading out to take a walk, mostly to clear my head, maybe also to kill the aimless part of the evening, and we made eye contact. "You okay with lavender?" she asked, gesturing to the planter. "I think it was dying before I got here." I shrugged, smiling. "I'm okay with anything that smells better than the inside of my fridge." That earned a laugh. Small. Honest. "I'm Olivia," she said, wiping her hand on her jeans before offering it. "Evan," I said, taking it. Her grip was firm but warm. She looked me in the eye when she shook my hand. No hesitation, no awkwardness. And I noticed, then, the faintest streak of silver at her temples. It didn't age her. It suited her. Like something she'd earned. We didn't talk long. Just a few pleasantries. I helped her carry an old mirror inside. She insisted it wasn't heavy, but I offered anyway. Inside, the place was still half in boxes. Neat, but sparse. No family photos. No art on the walls. "Just got out of a long-term rental," she said, noticing my glance. "Still deciding what gets to stay." I nodded, not pressing. She didn't offer more, and I didn't expect her to. But as I stepped outside, she called after me. "Evan?" I turned. "Thanks for not making this feel strange." I gave a half smile. "I'll try not to break anything else." She laughed softly and shut the door behind her. That night, I found myself scrolling through her name, Olivia, in my phone's contacts. I hadn't added it, but I wanted to. I didn't know what I'd say if I did. She was clearly older, maybe late 30s, early 40s at most. But it wasn't just the age. It was the way she carried herself. She felt distant, polished, tired, and yet, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The sound of her voice, the way her fingers hesitated on the door frame before she disappeared inside. The kind of details you don't usually notice, unless you're already looking too closely. I told myself it was just curiosity, just neighborly intrigue. But the truth? I'd been alone for a long time. Not physically. I had friends, coworkers, even the occasional casual date. But this was different. There was something about her presence, quiet, self-contained, that made the silence between my walls feel heavier when she wasn't near. Something had shifted, and I had no idea how to name it yet. It started happening in small, almost invisible ways. One afternoon, I came back from the store and found a brown envelope taped to my door. Inside was a handwritten note. Noticed your mailbox is leaning. Hope this helps. There was a $10 Home Depot gift card clipped to the note. I looked toward her door, but it was closed. Still, I knew it was her. The handwriting was clean, elegant, and I recognized the slope of her capital O. Later that week, I caught her just as she was returning from a run. Her cheeks were flushed, and a single earbud dangled at her side. I got your note, I said, stepping out with my coffee. Pretty sure you just gave me the most polite excuse to fix something I've ignored for months. She smiled, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. I figured you'd either fix it or throw the gift card at something less noble, like discount plants. That sounds exactly like me. She laughed, really laughed this time. I didn't know how to describe the sound. It was soft, but it stayed in the air, lingered like perfume. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I made someone laugh like that. Since someone let me. After that, things began to feel natural. I catch glimpses of her at odd hours, watering plants barefoot in the early morning, sweeping the porch in slouchy sweaters and messy buns. Sometimes she'd wave. Sometimes we'd say nothing at all, just look at each other like the pause between us was enough. Then came the rainstorm. The kind of spring downpour that turns sidewalks to rivers and makes power flicker just for fun. I just finished dinner when the lights cut out. I stood at my window, watching the street go dark, when I noticed movement on her porch. A flashlight beam swept the path ahead of her as she stepped out, had turned toward my place. She knocked. I opened the door, holding a candle like I was in a Victorian ghost story. "Power out for you too?" she asked, her voice a little breathless from the rain. "Yeah, come in." She hesitated. "I don't want to bother." "You're not," I said, already stepping back to make space. She came in slowly, damp strands of hair clinging to her temple. I offered her a towel. She took it, dabbing at her sleeves, then looked around my place, the narrow kitchen, the stack of dishes drying in the rack, the half-drawn sketch on my tablet. "You draw." "Sometimes," I said. "Design mostly. But sometimes when I can't sleep, I just sketch." There was a silence between us that felt oddly full. She didn't move to sit, but didn't leave either. I watched her eyes travel the space. There was something in her face I hadn't seen before. "I used to paint," she said. "A lifetime ago." "Why'd you stop?" She met my eyes. I forgot how. I nodded. I knew what she meant. Not literally. Emotionally. How life sometimes makes you forget the parts of yourself that once felt vital. We ended up sitting on the floor in front of the couch, candles between us, the rain soft against the windows. She asked about my work. I asked what brought her here. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I needed a place that didn't remind me of anyone else." That was all. I didn't press. I just listened. Let the silence stretch. And in that quiet, she looked at me, not like a stranger, not even like a neighbor. Something else. Her hand rested on her knee, fingers playing absently with the hem of her sleeve. And maybe I imagined it, but her foot brushed lightly against mine. She didn't move it away. It could have meant nothing. But that night, when she finally stood and said goodnight, her voice softer than usual, I walked her to the door. Rain still falling. The porch light flickering weakly. She turned to say something, maybe thank you, maybe nothing at all, but she stopped herself. Just looked at me. There was that pause again, and something inside it was beginning to hum. The next morning, the power was back, but something else had shifted. I woke up and the first thing I did was check my phone, not for messages, not even for the time, but to see if I had imagined the whole night. I hadn't. The faint trace of her perfume still lingered on the towel I'd handed her. That day passed slower than most. I couldn't focus on work. Every time I sat down at my laptop, my thoughts drifted to the way her eyes held mine in the candlelight. The quiet steadiness in her voice. The way she said, I forgot how, like it cost her something. I didn't see her that day. Not in the yard, not on the porch, not even a shadow behind the curtains. I told myself it was fine. That we were just neighbors and the night had been nothing more than two people sharing shelter from a storm. But the silence between us felt too deliberate. It wasn't until Saturday afternoon that I saw her again. I was out back, watering the overgrown rosemary bush that refused to die, when I heard her voice from the other side of the fence. "You ever trim that thing? Or just let it conquer the yard?" I turned. She stood there in faded jeans, a gray t-shirt knotted loosely at her hip, sunglasses pushed up in her hair. Casual. Effortless. Like nothing had happened. "I'm conducting an experiment," I said. "Seeing how long it takes before it becomes sentient and eats the mailbox." She smiled, then tilted her head. "I made too much tea. Come over if you want." I didn't hesitate. not even for a second. Her kitchen smelled like bergamot and lemon peel. She poured from a glass teapot, no bags, no microwave. The kind of tea you steep with intention, the kind you drink slowly. We sat at the small table near the window. Sunlight streaked across the tile floor, and outside, wind danced lazily through the trees. We talked. Not small talk, real talk. I told her about growing up in a town where I always felt like the quiet one, the background guy. She asked what it felt like to design things for people you'd never meet. It feels like making something beautiful for a stranger who doesn't know you exist, I said. And that somehow makes it easier. She nodded, like she understood. Then she told me about the city she left behind, the job she walked away from, the marriage that ended long before the papers were signed. He was always in love with who I used to be, she said, watching the steam curl from her cup. But he stopped asking who I was becoming. I didn't respond. Just let her words settle. I'm not looking for anyone, she added after a long pause. I know, I said quietly. Another silence passed between us, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like both of us were choosing not to move too fast, like something unspoken had been acknowledged. After a while, she stood and opened a nearby cabinet. From it, she pulled a small canvas wrapped in craft paper. I painted this years ago, she said. Found it while unpacking. Thought I'd thrown it out. She peeled away the paper slowly and revealed a painting, abstract, full of muted blues and soft golds. It wasn't perfect. The lines bled in places, the strokes hesitant, but it was honest. It looked like feeling. I stopped trusting myself, she said. Stopped believing the things I made were worth keeping. I looked at her. Really looked. You kept this, I said. She met my gaze. Barely. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of anything dramatic. Just her. Her voice, her silences, the quiet strength in her vulnerability. I didn't know what we were doing. I wasn't even sure she knew. But there was something between us now, stretching and soft, like a thread pulled taut between doorways. And I had the terrifying feeling that if either of us tugged too hard, it might snap, or pull us toward each other in a way we couldn't undo. The next few weeks blurred into something I couldn't name. She didn't text, not that we ever exchanged numbers. And I didn't knock. But there were moments. Always these small, strange, almost touches of something neither of us dared say aloud. One night, I stepped outside for air around 10. It had been hot all day, and the pavement was still breathing warmth. I walked to the edge of the porch just in time to see her stepping out of her back door, barefoot, cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. We both stopped. She glanced over, and I did the same. No words. Just a breath between us. I almost waved. She almost did too. Instead, we stood there for a few minutes, just watching the night from separate sides of a thin line neither of us had drawn, but both respected, and maybe feared. She disappeared back inside first. I went in a minute later, pretending I hadn't stayed outside just to watch her go. It wasn't avoidance. It was restraint. But one day, that quiet middle ground cracked. It was a Sunday morning. I was baking, don't ask why. I barely knew what I was doing. Maybe I just needed something to keep my hands busy. I burned half the scones, overwhipped the cream, and nearly dropped the tray pulling it from the oven. And then the doorbell rang. It was Olivia. She stood there holding a book and a small paper bag. I found this at a used bookstore, she said, offering the book. Said it reminded me of you. The cover was minimal, muted colors, sharp design. A memoir. I hadn't even spoken to her about books. I looked down at the bag. And this. Better scones. I laughed, stepping aside to let her in. You're saving me from myself. Inside, we sat on the floor again, backs to the couch. She curled one leg beneath her, took a bite of her own scone, and nodded in satisfaction. You don't bake, she teased. No. I emotionally guess. She smiled, but then it faded slightly. Not gone, just thinner. You've been quiet, she said. So have you. She nodded, took another small bite, and then stared ahead, eyes fixed on the wall like it might answer something for her. I've been trying to keep boundaries, she said. Not because I don't enjoy being around you, but because I do. That landed harder than I expected. My throat tightened. I stared down at my cup. I wasn't sure if I was imagining this, I admitted. You weren't. Silence again. Heavier now, but honest. She turned toward me, legs tucked beneath her like a girl half her age, posture still composed, face unreadable except for her eyes. They were clearer than I'd ever seen them. I'm not afraid of being seen, Evan, but I'm afraid of what it'll mean if you keep seeing me. I met her gaze. Then tell me what you want me to do. She was quiet. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because the answer mattered. I want you to stay, she said. But I want us both to be careful. I'm already being careful, I said. She looked down at her hands. Not careful enough, maybe. Or maybe just not honest enough. I swallowed. The truth was simple. I think about you, I said. More than I should. She didn't look up, but her fingers curled slightly on her thigh. And when I see you, I continued, there's this part of me that just wants to sit closer. A little closer every time. That's when she looked at me. You know how dangerous that sounds, she whispered. I nodded. But it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels quiet. Like something I haven't had in a long time. She exhaled, soft and broken. Like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Then she said, me too. That was the moment. Not a kiss. Not even a touch. Just two people finally telling the truth to each other in a room that had become something sacred. And maybe that was what scared us both the most. Not the want, but the fact that the wanting had nowhere to hide anymore. The next time I saw her, she was sitting on her porch reading, legs folded underneath her, a glass of something amber at her side. I hesitated before stepping out. Part of me wanted to go back inside, give her space. The other part, the honest part, didn't want space. It wanted more of that moment on the living room floor. More quiet truth. More of her. I grabbed 2 mugs of coffee. No pretense, no plan. Just walked over, careful, measured. Mind if I sit? She looked up, lowered her book, and nodded toward the empty chair across from her. Not at all. The morning was still. Just birds and the creak of old wood. I haven't finished the book you gave me, I said, but I'm already underlining too much. She smiled gently. Good. Means it found the right reader. We sipped in silence for a while. She looked rested, peaceful even. But there was something about her posture, how she kept glancing toward the edge of the porch, that made me feel like she was balancing on something invisible. I keep trying to talk myself out of this, she said finally. I looked at her. Out of what? This, she said. Us. Whatever. This is becoming. Why? She gave a small, breathless laugh. You're 26, Evan. And you're not. Her gaze turned toward me, sharp but tired. Don't you ever wonder what people would say? What they'd assume? I do, I admitted. But I wonder more what it means that I'm here, and you haven't asked me to leave. She blinked, looked away. I don't want to stop this, I said quietly. Even if it stays exactly as it is. She looked back at me then, really looked, and the tension in her shoulders eased just a little. Do you know what the hardest part of being with someone older is? She asked. No. It's not the age. Not the assumptions. It's wondering if you're just filling a gap in someone's timeline. A phase. A story they'll one day tell starting with, back when I was young. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. What if you're not a phase? I asked. What if you're the moment I start waking up differently? She went still. I meant it. Because for the last few weeks, everything had shifted. Food tasted more like something. Music made more sense. Silence was no longer something I filled with distraction. It was something I sometimes looked forward to, because it reminded me of her. She didn't answer right away. But later that evening, I heard a knock at my door. It was her. No coat, no preamble. Just Olivia, in the soft light of the hallway, looking like someone trying not to run anymore. She stepped inside and sat on the edge of my couch. I keep feeling like I should apologize, she said. Like I've crossed a line I swore I wouldn't. I sat next to her, not close, but not far. You haven't, I said. You're younger. I'm old enough. She glanced at me, her face unreadable. I know. I turned toward her. Then what are we still afraid of? She didn't speak, not right away. Just breathed. Then, slowly, she said, I'm afraid I'll let myself be seen again, and then be left. That hurt more than I expected. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. I reached out and took her hand, not as a move, not as a moment. Just something human, something honest. I'm not here to pass through you, I said. I'm here because I keep finding pieces of myself I didn't know were missing, every time I sit next to you. Her eyes filled, just slightly. She didn't pull her hand away. That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't cross any lines. We just sat there, her hand in mine, our shoulders barely touching. And that space between us? It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a beginning. There's a stillness that comes after something sacred, like the air knows not to rush in too fast. Like silence becomes a shelter, not an absence. That's how the days felt after she sat beside me on the couch. We didn't make plans. We didn't name what was happening. But something softened between us, some invisible resistance we'd both been holding on to. She started stopping by in the mornings. Sometimes just to drop off tea. Sometimes just to sit for a minute before work. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just existed in the same space. I'd be editing a layout, and she'd sit near the window flipping through a book, barefoot, one leg tucked beneath her. The kind of ordinary that doesn't feel ordinary when it's with someone who calms the noise in your head. And I didn't need to ask if it mattered to her. I saw it in how she lingered a little longer every time she left. But I also knew something was coming. You can feel it when something beautiful is balancing on a ledge. It was a Wednesday, early June, the kind of warm that makes the breeze feel like a gift. I was sketching in the back room when I heard a soft knock on the doorframe. Olivia stood there, hair down, no makeup. Her eyes looked tired, and not in a sleepy way. "Can we walk?" she asked. I set everything down. We went out through the back, past the rosemary, along the narrow sidewalk that curled toward the park. We didn't speak for the first few blocks, just walked side by side, arms brushing occasionally. She kept her hands in the pockets of her cardigan. Finally, when we reached the bench near the trees, she stopped. "I got a call yesterday," she said, not looking at me. I waited. "A job offer. Back in Portland. It's a good one." I didn't apply. An old colleague put my name in. "Do you want it?" She was quiet. Then, "I don't know." We sat. The world kept moving around us, cars in the distance, wind through the trees, but in my chest, everything felt suddenly too still. "I wasn't looking for this," she said finally. "I didn't plan on anyone, especially not you." I nodded. "Same." She turned to me then. "You make me feel like I'm allowed to start again, like I'm not just what I've lost." I swallowed. "You are." Her eyes welled. "But I don't want to stay because I'm afraid to leave. And I don't want you holding on because you think I need saving." "I don't," I said quietly. "I'm holding on because when I see you in the morning light, I forget the part of myself that used to feel small." She smiled through the tears. I didn't kiss her. I just reached over and rested my hand over hers. She squeezed it. "If I go," she said, "it's not because this wasn't real." I know. We sat like that, fingers tangled, hearts a little heavier, but honest. She left 3 weeks later. No dramatic goodbyes. No promises we couldn't keep. Just a final morning where she stood in my kitchen, looked around like she was memorizing it, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Then she hugged me, slow, full, one arm around my neck, the other pressing into my back like she was trying to hold something in place just a second longer. And then she was gone. Months passed. I still kept her mug on the top shelf. Still made the tea she used to bring. Still walked past the rosemary bush, now slightly trimmed but still wild enough to remember her. And sometimes, on those rare mornings when the sky turns that soft gold and the world feels quiet again, I still hear her voice. Not in words, but in the way stillness no longer feels empty. It feels like her. Like something that mattered. Something that didn't need a name to be real. And maybe that's enough.